Greetings, this time from Hong Kong. We're on the road doing our podcast. Today, I'm really thrilled to have Christopher White from Conservation International. And for those of you who are not familiar with this very important large organization, Christopher will fill you in. And thank you very much for joining. Christopher, briefly tell us, who is Christopher White? What is your big journey? And who is Conservation International? And what specifically are you doing over there with respect to sustainable investment? And thank you again for taking the time to do this.
Definitely, and thank you for having me, Robert. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Who's Christopher White? I'm a conservationist at heart, if you will, a recently found conservationist. I joined Conservation International through a very untraditional way of getting into the industry, into the body of work. I won't go too much into the details, but basically I've been at CI now for about a little over 3.5 years, mostly focused on the strategy of our organization and trying to understand where the nexus lies between financing or creative financing and our operational capacities as they sit in the field, really where the rubber meets the road in terms of looking after wildlife, in terms of reforestation, in terms of land management, management of fisheries, the whole nine yards. So we cover a very wide group, very wide base of conservation-focused operations. A little bit about CI. CI was started almost about 35, 40 years ago now. It was born out of TNC with a focus on international conservation work. Today, it sits at
briefly tell people who is TNC.
The Nature Conservancy. I apologize. The Nature Conservancy. I'll try to. We won't go too deep into the acronyms. The Nature Conservancy. And today it's about 1,700 employees, spread almost entirely internationally. We have a base of operations in the United States. I'm based in Seattle, but majority of our employees and our associates work overseas in our 3 regions. That's Africa, mostly sub-Saharan Africa, Asia Pacific, that's mostly like in the Golden Triangle area, Southeast Asia, and South America, Latin America. So pretty much Mexico all the way down through South America. And you'll find CI offices and CI personnel in any parts of that world. And yeah, we really focus on 3 dominating pillars of conservation work. The first one is nature, basically nature is a solution. So that is the theory and the concept that nature is 30% of the solution for climate change. That kind of embodies our restoration work and our carbon work. The second pillar is oceans. So in oceans, we try to focus on maximizing our marine protected areas. Those are, you can kind of think of them as now like national parks or conservancies in the ocean. We try to maximize the efficiencies of those environments. And the last, I said 3. The last 2, one is innovation and finance, which is what we're going to talk about today. I'm very excited. And let's see, we have nature NCS, we have oceans. Oh my goodness, you'll have to excuse me. It is 5 a.m. in the morning here, and my brain is not quite on track. There are 3 great pillars. We focus on all the work. You can find us in so many parts of the world. Yeah, we really try to take a holistic approach to conservation work.
Just one thing that I wanted to ask you. You had reached out to me several months ago about looking to create something new, something aligned more with investment. Are you able to talk a little bit about a new direction for CI, Conservation International?
Yeah, and actually, you just reminded me what that 3rd star is. It's major positive economies. Really important component. So yeah, so this is this new sort of venture focus that we're trying to dig into is the blending of, you could call it maybe traditional capitalist concepts into conservation work. And that's trying to find what the right blend of certain kind of financing is, both from philanthropic financing all the way to capital financing, investment return financing, and figuring out if there is a ratio that you can put into a landscape of that type of funding that maximizes your returns, both from an economic standpoint, a traditional investment standpoint, and from a nature standpoint. And under our new star, Nature Positive Economies, and our previous star in Innovation, Science, and Finance, we've largely found that the combination most of the time already exists, but maybe isn't done so intentfully. So we're out on an adventure and an exploration to go and find if we can be more intentful about blending funding types and build a portfolio that is maximizing the returns as far as you can see it.
Is going to be for profit?
That's up for debate right now. I have my own opinions, and I should say a total disclaimer. If we get into investment strategies, I'm not a SEC regulated agent, so if you're listening to this podcast out there, take whatever I say with a grain of salt. I'm not providing any investment advice whatsoever. But we have a couple of partner organizations that we've talked to over the last 12 months. Some of them have gone the for-profit route, some of them have gone the nonprofit route. Some of them are a blend of both. I'm not entirely sure for Conservation International what the solution will be. Maybe a combination of all the above. So that's certainly looking more and more likely every day. But the idea is to at least bring for-profit mindsets and for-profit theories and strategy into our space. And if I may just sort of touch on that point, I think for the last 50 some odd years, conservation nonprofits have largely believed that the for-profit world industry would come in behind all the work that we've done and provide their flavor onto the landscapes and the seascapes in which we operate in and pivot towards more green activities. And I don't think some organizations, some companies have done a very good job in doing that, but I don't think we've seen an industry-wide effort to go in that direction. And what I'm hoping is that this effort provides a more tangible means of bringing along industry and capital into nature and financing activities that we know work both for people and for the planet.
There's been billions and billions and billions of dollars pouring into climate tech, and hardly any of them are really going to impact climate in the short term. Maybe long term, but not really in the short term. And very little, a very minuscule percentage of those billions is going into nature restoration, nature-based solutions, biodiversity, mainly because there's no unicorn, there's no upside, and nature is taken for granted and not really priced carefully. What if, I mean, you've researched it a lot, you've looked around, you've been doing a lot of the CI Conservation Center did a lot of nonprofit activity in nature-based solutions. What do you think that you see are the greatest challenges in getting for-profit money to take a serious look at biodiversity?
I love this question because I think it's largely on us as the conservation industry, as conservation organizations to answer that question. I think one of the biggest indicators I've seen of building confidence into what you're doing and building confidence in potentially economic solution is thinking about things as you would any other business. And I think what we're finding is that there's really no difference when it comes to someone deciding to invest in something that is largely nature focused with returns versus someone that's thinking about investing in something that's considered traditionally risky. Like for an American or in the West, most of what you'd see in an investment community is that, if it's something a small business maybe overseas in the developing economy, that's considered as risk. And the same rules apply to our body of work. There really isn't any difference. I think what makes the climate tech industry so profitable and so intriguing is the fact that it's tech. You have products that people can see and touch and feel and watch build, and that invokes a degree of confidence and belief into something. And obviously, the hope is that it works. And I think just we haven't done a very good job in understanding those dynamics and making sure that I don't want to sell trees as products, as the Amazon as products, but kind of taking that mentality and building confidence around nature-based solutions. We'll call it nature technology as the solution going forward, and then adding value to that as an intrinsic either product or commodity that someone would traditionally invest into as either business or purchase a product. And we've seen a little bit of that when it comes to sort of carbon markets. There's a product that you can sell, largely can't see. There's biodiversity credits. That's a starting market that's trying to value biodiversity. But I think it's going to take us going one step further and thinking about the financing structure and making sure that we bring along what you traditionally find in high risk, what are considered traditionally high risk opportunities overseas, and taking that same mentality that a business owner would have there into our body of work.
And how do we do that? I mean, it sounds really easy, but what needs to change? I mean, as long as I remember Professor Rodson Lal was talking about 330 gigaton carbon drawdown potential, which is incredible, but most of these climate tech things are talking in much, much smaller fractions of that. And maybe in 5 or 10 years, nothing in the really short term, like dry air capture is almost comical to look at. It's taking a shot glass to the North Sea and say you're going to move it, or a shot glass to the Atlantic Ocean. So how do we get people to accept the fact that nature has a value and get the world to accept, okay, carbon drawdown is worth so much?
Yeah, that's kind of the debate that we're having internally, and trying to understand the direction that CI should go in, not only as a nonprofit, but then also just as what we would hope people consider as an industry leader. And I think what it really comes down to is maybe the value isn't in carbon. Maybe it's in something that's right next to carbon. Maybe it's something that is sequestering carbon in a way that is scientifically and naturally accurate, but it's maybe not carbon itself. The example I have to give here is a program in CI that we've had for the last, I think, 4 years now. It started right when the pandemic kicked off. It's called the African Conservancy Facility. You can look it up. But basically, what happened here was several conservancies in Africa were identified as basically being short of cash and liquidity, simply because there were no tourists, right? No one was traveling in the early stages of COVID, and conservancies have to fund staff. There's rangers, there's cook staff, there's hotel crews, there's mechanics, there's leases to be paid. These are relatively complex business ventures, and African Conservancy Facility, I'll refer to it as ACF going forward, basically provided some of these conservancies a loan, a returnable grant that gave these conservancies some extra buffer, so they continue operations, so they continue watching on wildlife. And as the world economy has come back and as tourism comes back, we've seen those conservancies return quite rapidly back to the pre-COVID, at least most of them anyway. We've seen them return back to the pre-COVID occupancy rates. And we know that the land that we have been putting money into in terms of the conservancy and in terms of the indigenous populations that live in the conservancy areas, it's of higher value there's better wildlife, there's healthier trees, there's healthier grasslands. And that is where I think sort of that this example is like where we find value that people can understand a little more, rather than going purely the carbon route, which for you and me and others in this industry, we see carbon pretty obviously. We understand how it's sequestered. We understand the role it plays in climate change. But I think for a good chunk of the world, it's really hard to put money into something that a tree is seemingly invisibly putting into the ground. Whereas something like a conservancy, where scientifically you can prove that things are better for nature, as well as generating some form of income, that makes it just that much easier to draw those parallels and connection. Oh, Robert, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So basically, you're saying that the added value of a healthy ecosystem is financially intangible, but spiritually and mentally or emotionally valuable. And so if there's 5 times, about approximately a little bit more, a little bit less, about 5 times more wealth than there is global GDP. So even taking off liabilities of real estate, and so there's a lot of money out there. Does the fires in Los Angeles, have you seen a spike in donors for Conservation International? Oh my God, it's really happening now. And not only the insurance companies are not going to pay out for the houses burnt or they're going to go bankrupt. We have to do something. So do you see people realizing that just looking at short-term financial return isn't going to cut it?
I think it largely depends on what you're able to mobilize someone to put their money into. Um, for instance, like ACF, those payments are generated annually over a 5-year period, amortized. So that's relatively short term, right? You're starting to get your money back at the end of the first year. Um, when it comes to sort of our culture, at least US based culture, and I'll say that I have friends and family in the LA area, and some of them have been affected by the fire. And it's absolutely tragic how fast things have changed for that city. Um, but as a culture, we're we prefer being more reactive when it comes to disasters, at least from a large scale, than proactive. And I think it goes back to understanding sort of where value is. It's so much harder to convince someone to buy into something that you say that hey, that's going to prevent something bad happening in the future, and that individual never sees that bad thing, versus if a disaster happens and you purchase a higher seawall or you build better roads or you change like the fire plan for a city. I think people can see, like I said, see, touch, and feel, right? Like those changes. And it's so for us, it's about that that proactive activity where we're trying to understand like how do I bring someone who's a culture, who's largely reactive, who values reactive measures, and bring them forward to proactive measures. And as I said before, it's largely, at least some of us think it's largely applying the same rules of a general business plan into the work that you're doing, um, and trying to build that bridge between what most people consider as traditionally a philanthropic activity versus an economic activity or an investable activity.
But the nature-based solution that you're working on as a potential new initiative from CI, that's one of the third pillars. Are you, will be for-profit returns or low value, low profit returns, or this will be pure write-offs, philanthropic write-offs?
It's going to be a mix. At least that's what the theory is at the moment. And I should add that there's a bunch of organizations that have already kind of been doing this quite successfully. You can look up, there's a wonderful partnership between the World Resource Institute, WRI, and the amazing organization called Realize Impact, that they've managed to blend both philanthropic capital and investment capital to do pretty amazing things. So when we're talking about just general returns, um, the way we've been sort of thinking about it is by mixing capital, you create conditions where people don't feel like something is so risky. In nature-based economic activities, you can find instances where you have returns that are in the 7 to 12% range, something that is relatively competitive against everything else going on in the market. And of course, you'll find your unicorns here and there. But what we're looking at are probably things between the 4.5% and 5% return rate, which for those of you who know sort of the US Treasury bonds, a 10-year Treasury bond does about 4.23%. I think that's what the rate was a couple of days ago, the 10-year projection. And so what prompts someone to put their money into a Treasury bond at 4.23% over a 10-year period versus investing something in the market that's 7%, 12%? And it comes back again to sort of risk. Like people are betting that the United States Treasury will exist in perpetuity, and so they're willing to take a hit on a lower interest rate in that investment. When you begin to blend financing into a landscape, we begin to see risk to the investment capital go down quite a bit. And what we're trying to build is this narrative around blended financing in landscapes and seascapes where the risk to that investment capital is significantly reduced because of the grant money and the recoverable grant money that are being introduced via certain interventions, be it policy work, be it land management work, be it paying for scientists to go out and do studies, and ensure that the interventions that the economic activity are putting in play are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. So a long way to answer your question is that basically it comes back to risk, and we're probably looking at a 4.5 to 5% return rate on some of our ventures at the moment, if and once we begin to take on investment capital.
There's an organization in the Netherlands called Common Land. I don't know if you're familiar with them. So they do 10-year land restorations, very large, long-term projects, but do it purely as a nonprofit, not as a for-profit. Do you think that it's better to go that route, then you don't have to mess around with structures and returns and fund management, decks and getting regulated and all this stuff?
I think both are really important for different reasons. I think nonprofits have a higher degree of flexibility when it comes to doing certain things that for-profits just don't get, and vice versa. But I guess I go back to sort of your previous comment, which is, we have an insane amount of wealth out there that's going into activities that are extractive in nature, that are destroying nature. And it's not going to things that could potentially, one, generate returns, and two, benefit people and the planet in a way that is much more holistic than what it currently is in. If we want to pull in all that capital, those billions of dollars, trillions, if not trillions of dollars that are out there into nature, we have to find a common ground. And I think that common ground is unfortunately doing the legwork, either partnering with organizations that have the due diligence backgrounds with various government agencies, have an SEC accreditation so we can handle investment financing, have the legal framework to do it properly without risking nonprofits. But like I said, at the same time, the work that Common Land does is incredibly important, and I don't think they'd be able to do most of it if they were a for-profit. I think the nonprofit standing gives them a high degree of flexibility and the capacity to work with long land leases and improving land without being absolutely hammered by various income tax issues, various land issues, when it comes to actually covering your bills. So it's going to be a mix of both. But at the moment, all we have is the for-profit work really at scale. And so how do we bring the rest of it in?
But I mean, you have a lot of, I mean, over 1,500 or I think 1,700 employees, so it's a big organization. And it probably means you've gotten lots of donations over the year, the 40 some odd years that you've been operating. So and you already have that in place.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't it be say we need you to double your donations because we have to do something to prevent wildfires like in LA? We got to get serious about restoring nature. Wouldn't that be a better sell than trying to make some people 4 or 5% interest on their money when they probably could miss it anyway?
If if every country in the world had similar tax laws as we find here in the United States or even in Singapore or in some countries in Europe, then I would say probably yes. Because individuals benefit by giving to philanthropy, by participating in philanthropy, individuals can benefit from tax breaks, tax credits when it comes to giving philanthropically. Tax deductible gifts is the word, was the phrase used here in the United States. Unfortunately, not every single country in some of our biggest economies in the world don't afford their citizens those opportunities and those benefits. And in some cases, we have certain countries that largely dissuade people from participating in philanthropy for whatever
Mm.
economic reason that they've given. So, like I said, I would agree with you if we had policy that was pretty wide when it comes to philanthropic endeavors, but we don't. Um, Most of the policy in the world and the biggest economies that we have are focused on driving change from that return seeking investment style financing. And so I think we kind of have to follow that. We don't have a choice, unfortunately. Um, that might not be a bad thing though. So far, like for instance, this ACF thing that we're talking about right now, like that has driven innovation when it comes to putting capital into areas of the world that normally no one would put money into. Um,
What does an
and
ATF
yeah,
stand for?
Africa Conservancy Facility.
Oh, oh, ACF.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. Yeah.
Okay. And you've looked at a lot of different project models, structures, systems, partners. What what struck you the most about, I mean, what, because we don't have billions in donations or millions or very little. Um, and I see so many solutions all the time that work and that can scale. What struck you when you started speaking to various people and said, "Oh wow, they're doing this and doing that"? Um, are you hopeful because you see there are clear solutions over there that just need more money to scale?
It's two-part. The first thing that surprised me was looking at it from the investment side, right? The donor investor side, the incoming cash. The first thing that surprised me, what I was very um, happy to find, was that a lot of people, both individuals, organizations, other facilities and foundations, were looking for something different. We're looking for solutions that blended return-seeking capital and philanthropic dollars or capital. Um, and it's an interesting shift. I think that hasn't been around for a long time. I think it's maybe developed over the last 10 to 12 years. But we do see more and more interest into activities that can provide a higher degree of traditional investment style returns and activities. And I think people believe when they see something, when they see a blend, they attach the word sustainability to it. So if I have a project that I get, maybe 25 to 35% of it is funded philanthropically, and the rest of it is funded through investment capital, and it's able to generate returns over the period of its lifespan and grow, that is seen as a sustainable conservation venture on the part of the investor and the donor. On the other side, um, at CI, we've begun to really change our mindset when it comes to understanding spaces. So we like to think in landscapes and seascapes, large geographical areas where you find everything going on inside of them. And when we look inside those areas, and I go back to African Conservancy Facility as one of those areas, the various conservancies, the 4 conservancies that we've put returnable grants into, you can see there's just more happening. If you can provide people both kinds of funding for different reasons, those opportunities exist more frequently than we thought, and 2, they tend to just work faster. And who guessed that if you could incentivize a landscape to value its nature because there were more tourists coming, and so they decided to adopt newer rangeland practices when it comes to herding cattle, so that it had a lesser impact on nature and on the wildlife because it was benefiting the ecotourism situation. That's amazing, but you never would have gotten that so quickly if you hadn't put those two options in front of people for that landscape. So I think that's what's been the most exciting and surprising, is that, one, the money coming in is looking for something different and new and like economically sustainable, and then the areas that can receive money have those opportunities to put investment style capital in. It's just a matter of finding the right ratio of capital and return and interest for business ventures to make sure that they actually survive properly.
And what was I mean, it's a new direction for Conservation International. You've been doing many, many things all over the world on many, many levels. What was the driver to choose this new path?
So I should say we've had the Nature for Finance division. It's one of our large divisions in the organization. We've had that for a very long time now. I think it's been at CI for about 12 or maybe even 15 years. And so there's always been a very healthy respect for what else is out there, what other solutions are out there. And I think we've always been looking. This recent, I think, venture, the ACF one, is a good example of that. But we've also had a lot of experience in creating conditions for other entities to put their money into, be it fisheries, be it ecotourism, be it dive boat operations. There's just a lot more. There's a lot there that we already have in our portfolio. We already have in our history. And I think some of us believe and some of us are hoping that it is literally a matter of starting to connect those dots and understanding what do we have in our portfolio that already could generate a return, and what is going to be philanthropic for the rest of its lifespan. And identifying those two entities within our landscapes and seascapes shouldn't be that hard. So it's kind of in our nature already at CI to look for weird, I'll call it new creative solutions when it comes to benefiting nature and benefiting people. I'll say it up front, CI has, from its history, has been a bit of a, I don't want to say trailblazer, but maybe a bit of a rebel when it comes to working with industry and understanding what levers to pull on to benefit nature the most. But yeah, I think it's in our DNA already, which is very beneficial. And now we just have to put the pieces together.
And the ultimate grand ambition with this new initiative, on top of all of the other things you're doing on the ocean, what would you like to have achieved in 5 years?
5 years. So practically speaking, we have the African Conservancy Facility Round 2 is about to start. That's not going to look at investment style financing. That'll just be returnable grants still. What I'm hoping for in 5 years is that we've cracked the nut, at least from the legal perspective, on how to design ways to get more capital into doing things that we know work for nature and that are also generating a return for investors. And that might not happen within CI, that might happen adjacent to CI. But I think there's enough people outside of our organization, other partners, and other people in the space who are also trying to ask the same question. That gives me enough confidence that there's something there. And it would be, at least for us, it would be amazing to see a series of just very well thought out portfolios that exist within each of our region that is able to artfully put together and package blended finance opportunities for landscapes and seascapes that is tailored to the specific intervention and the specific business opportunity that exists within each one of those locations.
And so it's kind of legal structuring and, getting all that paperwork together. But these are projects that CI, Conservation International, would source, or these are projects that can come to Conservation International to propose?
It's honestly, it's a little too early to figure out at this point. It'll probably be a bit of both. It'll depend on the bandwidth of whatever entity is created or brought alongside the organization. I would imagine, like any well-run fund, there'll be an opportunity to bring things to the table. However, the benefit about working within our own portfolio is that we know the people, we know the spaces, we know where the risk is. We know where you need to actually, put the scalpel to that intervention to make sure that certain things are working in the right direction, and that you're not investing into something that actually isn't benefiting people in nature. It's just a traditional investment. So yeah, to work inside CI is probably the easiest, but I would imagine that as we begin to generate a lot more understanding around what our capabilities are and what exists within our landscapes and seascapes, we'll find more partners who come forward with ideas, business ventures at various stages of their lives, of that business life cycle, to present and ask for investment.
I'm sure that CI, Conservation International, has gone to many COPs,
Yeah.
for climate discussions. Probably also frustrated that things move glacially slow, although the glaciers are melting really fast now. So, and there's one coming up this year in Brazil on biodiversity. So I imagine that, your team will be over there. But doesn't everyone realize that unless the world actually puts, whether it's a carbon tax or a sea level rise credit, something of value, it'll always be tough to unlock serious money, whether as a donation or as an investment, because everyone is being offered pre-IPO stuff. So, is there any active engagement on trying to get a value of nature restoration? That because even I'm sure the people who give donations want to see, hey, are you making a difference? Is it working better? Is the water cleaner, the air cleaner? Is there more forest? Or people have a living, things like that. So does I'm sure CI is active at the COP discussions, but do they also try to lobby on the policy side?
Yeah. We have a fair, to answer that last question real quickly. We have a policy team. We have a policy center within our program, our global programs. They operate internationally, both at the COPs, at UNGA, which is the United Nations General Assembly. They do a good amount of work here in the United States, with our legislation, our legislative body, So yeah, we have a very long history of working in the policy space, both in the United States and abroad around the world. We also have we have teams in countries that work very closely with governments when it comes to generating policy that protects sometimes even national interests of a nation, of a country, and state, and benefits nature amazingly. So we have a good amount of experience there. To to go back to your first comment on um, how do you get people, large groups of people, to really value the work, either through carbon crediting or through biodiversity crediting or sea level, whatever it is, right? Um, I think, I mean, those measures work from the policy perspective in terms of raising money from taxpayers largely, um, to put back into nature and to increase the the profitability, the safety of citizens, and of international partners of countries. Um, I think when it comes to driving significant systemic change today, um, if I think about like what the tech industry has achieved in the last 15 years, it's it's hard to think of to to look at potentially another way other than through economy to drive like meaningful, serious change within nature, purely from a policy perspective. Um, I do think the way to move large quantities of money into doing things in nature is to generate value in nature in a way that we probably it's a little uncomfortable to think about, but is largely more like a traditional business venture than it is in terms of selling something that is altruistic in nature. Um,
Does it frustrate you that you see the figures? I mean, or CI sees the figures. They see the fires in LA, which I didn't realize how large the area was until I started
it's
to see
huge. It's
some
like the size of
statistics.
Manhattan.
This is it's like bigger than Manhattan. It's not a neighborhood. This is a huge area that's just been completely vaporized. Um, and yet the outrage or the demand to address climate, and they just voted in a climate denier, and just keep let's drill baby drill. Um, how do you keep your sanity and keep your focus and keep your energy to keep rolling this stone up the hill while everybody trying to pull you down?
I I think success is really going to require a high degree of I'll call it reaching across the aisle. Um, when I look at sort of what we value in nature, if we want to talk politics real quick, if I think about the science around climate change, what certain believe when it comes to climate change, what people value in nature, you know, once you boil it down to nature, you largely see a lot of similarities in terms of what people value, what they want to see. Doesn't matter what religion you're part of or
Mm.
or what party you belong to or aspire to. Um, when people see a giant mountain or they see pristine landscape, um, I think there's a universal valuing into that experience. I think we got to tap into that experience. We got to tap into people's intrinsic love for being in nature and seeing untouched landscapes, and well managed land and seascapes. Um, uh, it's just a matter of trying to figure out that narrative and being comfortable around it, and working with people who are largely maybe not like you and disagree with some of your opinions. Um, when it comes to the extremes, I really think that climate change is a bit of a national security crisis, um, and I think we probably haven't done a very good job in understanding that part and how it plays in politics. Um, especially here in the United States. I think you see other countries are significantly more interested. There's a great example in Kenya, northern Kenya. There's a
Mm.
national park, elephant park, that plays a huge role in Kenyan national security. And so what's that version for the United States? Um, and I think once we realize that we all have a vested interest in the positive change in nature and restoring and keeping what we have, um, is benefits us all in some way, shape, or form. It might just not translate so cleanly or in a way that we like.
Um, thanks for that. Because personally, I don't really think there'll be a big shift in money flows addressing climate with the new administration, because that's one good thing about the financial sector and wealthy individuals, whether donors or not. They're quite predictable, and they do follow, where is the risk and opportunity. So I don't really anticipate, um, a banning of investment in, climate solutions. I just don't, I don't think, and I think it will accelerate. So I don't see that. I mean, there'll be probably banning of statements by scientists on government websites about climate. You'll have that, but it'll be hard to block that out while all of Los Angeles is burning to the ground. So I don't really, really see that, but I agree with you that the narrative has been wrong, because climate and addressing climate is about resilience. It's not about sacrifice. And everybody kept pushing that we have to sacrifice, do less, bend less, go this, do that, drive less, don't drive. So everything is about sacrifice and not about making it more resilient, which I think is a better term to get people um, motivated. I'm quite sure the solutions are there, and I think that there are things that seem to be moving in the positive directions. The solutions are there. It's just that they haven't been able to sell it well, and there's been a lot of misinformation, and the pricing is still remains, a challenge. So initiatives like what you're doing, or what CI is doing, and hopefully what many others are doing, um, are helpful. My concern is that I'm not sure if we have enough runway in the time span, because we have to do basically two or three important things. We've got to reduce CO2 emissions dramatically. We've got to sequester the CO2 or carbon drawdown in as many ways as possible, hopefully biodiversity, because it's the quickest and cheapest. And then you've got to figure out a way to gain another 10 to 15 years to decarbonize industry, by, maybe doing solar radiation management of, preventing the North Pole from melting. So there's quite a few things that need to be done, but they are doable. I just don't. I just don't see. No one seems to have a sense of urgency. It seems, okay, we'll get together. Oh, I just got a folder from CI. I got to make a donation before Christmas
Yeah.
for this year's tax thing. All right, here, I'll send a check. But I don't see the sense of urgency, other than, people who are at the coalface like yourself.
Um, I think that sense of urgency thing is something that needs to be listened to, and not in the sense of sort of to naysay it or to say a large portion of the population, world population, is wrong for not worrying about climate change. I think we should take that on as a challenge and say, okay, what do you care about? And I
Hmm.
think at the end of the day, if I come to you with an investment and I say, hey, Rob, I have an investment into a hotel, It's in, we'll call it Indonesia. I can guarantee you, actually guarantee you a 5% return. You're going to get 5% back, no matter like hell or high water. In 5 years, you're gonna get 5% back on your investment. It's a hotel. Would you take that as an investment opportunity? Again,
Mm.
hypothetically, we're talking about like you will get 5%. There's absolute guarantee that you're going to get 5% back. Maybe.
This vehicle that you're creating is only for U.S. Tax
Oh no,
compliant. Okay.
no. Yeah,
Oh, that
and
makes it complex. Yeah, that makes it
yeah, it
much.
makes it very complex, and you have to do it that way because there's economies that want to participate in securing and restoring nature. They just don't get the benefit that we get here in the United States of like the tax deductible gift system. Um, so how do you encourage that money to participate in nature? And it's not going to be through philanthropy for whatever reason, but it wants to. There's a lot of capital out there that wants to participate. Um, it just hasn't been given the opportunity to do so yet.
The people that are listening to this podcast, which will be processed, in the coming weeks. It doesn't take long, but I need to send you a copy so that all is okay and there's no problems. There's always something when you launch an investment vehicle. Everybody has 2 cents. Oh, you can't talk about that. So
Yeah.
anyway, what can they do to help you or to help this new initiative from CI, other than writing a check? I mean, okay, they can make a donation, but what can they do to really help you mobilize even more money than you had already anticipated?
Um, I think it's sort of two-part. The first one is I guess considering what is impact. And I think a lot of people involve themselves in the impact investment market because they want to make sure that their capital that they're investing is ultimately having some sort of net positive impact on society and on nature.
Hmm.
Um, and what I will say is that I it's really hard, I think, as an investor to actually dig down and see what is actually happening when you put your money into something and what it spits out on the other side. And so I guess I would encourage um, investors or people in the space to begin to think about as how they would feel about entities like Conservation International beginning to play in this space and lend um, our background, our expertise, our brand into to working more alongside the investment world and what that could actually look like when it comes to impact. Um, and I guess the second part would be just please, and you can go to our website. It's very easy to use. There's wonderful material on there. You can dig down and read about all the work that we do. And if CI is not your flavor, there's other conservation organizations out there that are doing amazing things and are thinking about things in a similar way. Some of them are already doing it. And like I mentioned, WRI and Realize Impact, right? That is a partnership that is kind of already doing what we're talking about. Um, so uh, they're hard to find because we do probably a poor job talking about them enough. Um, I think Warren Buffett said, "Be wary of the investment pitch that draws applause." It's often the things that draw a yawn that are the most profitable for someone to put the money into. And I think we're taking the yawn route. um,
And you anticipate to launch this new initiative this year?
So so African Conservancy Facility round two will start shortly. They're hoping to raise $4 million. Um, Again, I'm not providing any sort of investment
No,
guidance
no,
or
no, no.
advice,
Okay.
but it's $4 million. I believe it's in returnable grants, which are great if for a foundation or an individual who wants to maximize the use of their philanthropic dollars that they have available to them. So that's this upcoming next couple months that'll launch, and that's looking at I believe, 4 or 5 new conservancies that we're operating with in Africa. And from there, I think it's hopefully a rocket launch, and when we can begin to expand the ACF portfolio and our portfolio elsewhere.
So, but CI is pretty big and they have a big donor base. Why so humble with such a low figure when the challenge is so great? Why not say we're gonna go for 100 million or 200 million or 250 or 300? I guess, I'm sure there are specific reasons and you don't want to overpromise,
Yeah.
but why so small?
So we're about to dive into really nerdy tax law stuff here in the United States.
Oh no, that's too boring.
So it's the reason why it's 4 at the moment and not 100 million is because when it comes to being regulated by the SEC, once you cap, if you're handling investment financing over $5 million, you have to become accredited and abide by
Oh, okay.
certain
Okay.
requirements when it comes to handling investment dollars inside the United States. And so we've capped ourselves at 5 million total. One, to avoid the scrutiny of the IRS and the SEC,
Right.
and two, to avoid a potential hit on our reputation. Because at the end of the day, like our brand is the premium conservation brand. We're well aware that some of these ideas might not sit well with others, might not sit well with our donor base, which is why, like I said, we're exploring these options and opportunities right
Mm.
now. This opportunity, this option might exist within CI, it might not exist within CI, and it's taking a lot of work to understand what will work
So
best without
if you
risking the brand.
if you got a lot of enthusiastic donors who put in more than five, you would have to not accept it.
Well, that's actually different. So if, let's say, a donor came and offered money to ACF, not returnable, just straight up, here's a donation, do with it what you want, just follow this vein. Um, you can handle that capital a little differently. Um, I think a lot of people are surprised to hear that nonprofits are allowed to invest their own money into stuff. Um, uh, CI doesn't have a very large endowment. We're not an endowment focused organization, but other
Okay.
organizations do have endowments, and they invest those all the time to generate returns to make sure that endowment increases, and that's just being fiscally responsible. Um, so yeah, you can do it. We can take donations and we can put them to work in this style of intervention. Definitely,
Okay. So it could go larger.
100%. Yeah, it could
Okay.
go larger.
Okay. All
I
right.
hope so.
Uh,
We'll have 12 months of research and understanding and trying
Yeah,
to
yeah,
gently
I'm
tap
glad I don't
away.
have to. I'm not in that space. It would drive me crazy. Our work is mainly mobilizing capital, but not having to do all that legal documentation and regulation and all of that.
The last
I
thing I'll say to
promise.
that, the last thing I'll say
Sorry.
to that is that it's actually it's I think what we're finding is that it's not that hard. Like that's the biggest kicker recently. It's not actually that hard to set up the correct entities to handle various types of capital going into the same direction.
Mhm.
Um, we've had some wonderful discussions recently of all different kinds of models that are perfectly but fiscally and legally allowable inside the United States and elsewhere. And that the solutions are the paperwork part's easy. It's deciding whether to fill the paperwork out or not. That's the
Right,
hardest part.
right, right.
So it's not going to be that hard, which is what I'm very excited about.
There was it kind of we're coming to the end. I just wanted to give a little bit of a interesting anecdote. There was a Dutch foundation that had 500 million euro. It was a hospital. It was sold, so they had a big pile of cash. And the CEO wanted to start doing sustainable investing in liquid assets, not too complicated index investing. So he told me, I'm going to start, I'm going to make mistakes and try to do each year a little bit better. So he told his wealth manager, I want to start doing index and investing with using an ESG as a lens. So the wealth manager said, yeah, that's a bad idea. You're going to lose money and it's very risky. So the CEO was determined, says, that's all right, I'll go find another wealth management who'll do that for me. All of a sudden, that wealth manager said, no, 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 okay, we can do it, we can do it, we can do it. So, and each year he did a little more and a little more and a little more. And after, I think, 5 or 6 years, he came back to me, he said, Robert, it's really not that hard to do. It's the same investing if you want to do it, but it's
Yeah,
really hard to do if you don't want to do it. And I think really that's what you were saying. I admire all of the work that you put in, because I know you put in a lot of time researching this and trying to get this going. And thank you for that. And the biodiversity also thanks you for all of the effort that you and CI does. We're coming to the end. This will be processed, and we'll post that. I'll send you a link in advance so you can take a look if there are no legal issues again. But Christopher, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. And if there's anything that we can do to help you, let me know.
definitely. And thank you so much for having me today, Robert. As early as it was, um, it's always a pleasure talking to you, and I really, really appreciate the opportunity to sort of send the message out there. I'm going to do a shameless thing here and say, if anyone out there listening to this podcast is interested in what we're doing, you can easily find me at C White. That's Christopher C. White at conservation.org, or you can get me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that anyone might have when it comes to blended finance approaches, and especially if it's about benefiting people and planet.
I can totally concur. Christopher is very, very, very accessible. Unlike
Yeah,
many other people who work at these large institutes, Christopher is always excellent at responding and giving you a no bullshit, straight, honest answer. Thank you, Christopher, for
I appreciate it,
doing
Robert.
this and also for the work that you do.
100%. Enjoy the rest of
Stay
your day.
well. See you
Will do.
soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.